So what I want to do is I actually want to tell a story in time and explain the convergence of factors that have led to a transformation period that we are experiencing now. So this is a slide that relates to about 10 years ago when I reached out to the biomedical engineering department at Duke and began to work with Pei Zhang, someone of whom you may know, who is an active participant in the therapeutic ultrasound community. We also recruited during that time Dr. Lowe, Dr. Shinohara from the immunobiology section of our medical center to begin asking some very basic preclinical questions about focused ultrasound impact on tissues. And you might say, well, what does this have to do with a clinically applicable device? This is our initial and interdisciplinary team, and this team participated in R01 grant applications, SPORE grant applications during the mid-2000s. We also were aware that solid tissue effects of HIFU were very attractive for many reasons, as summarized in this 2002 article. And in our preclinical studies, we were able to demonstrate in xenografts and mouse models tissue effects and survivorship benefits in melanoma models, and became very interested in prostate as well, and carried that work forward, showing a similar benefit. But we were living in the world of a basic engineering goal for prostate, which is identified here, which basically the ideal would be to bring the device to the organ with minimal toxicity, and the perfect entry point would be a natural orifice, the rectum. This does not require needling, it does not require surgical incision. It does create a high-quality, reproducible ablation volume, as we've seen in numerous presentations here at this meeting. But this is the history of prostate HIFU. It's a long history. It began in 1989, and as Dr. Chelsea identified, the march through the preclinical, the clinical applications, the early experience, the approvals in various nations, various continents, the wide adoption, and then the United States. So this is the early European multi-center study, which was published in 2006. And we were fortunate enough to have at our disposal for research purposes 2 devices which were perfectly designed for this natural orifice approach to the prostate. You must remember, at this time, 2007, we're beginning to see divisions amongst the oncologists about prostate cancer management. We're beginning to see reports from Europe, early reports of active surveillance, watchful waiting, concerns over overtreatment, concerns over overdiagnosis, and indeed we've seen a revolution in this field, mainly because of the Task Force Prevention Services recommendations in 2011 to abandon prostate cancer screening. It's a totally different topic, but it's changed the landscape, and we've now seen active surveillance become a first choice option for low-grade, low-volume prostate cancer. Well, it just so happened at this very point in time, in 2006, low-risk, low-stage prostate cancer was the study subject for the registration trial for the Ablatherm device. And at Duke, we were encouraged to participate. We gladly did so and became the lead site for this study, which ultimately completed in 2010 its enrollment and closed in 2014. This was a registration trial for the 510K de novo application for the Ablatherm approval that occurred in the fall of 2015. 135 subjects, carefully selected, low risk, low category, no prior TURP, no prior treatment, and we led the trial. We led the trial because we were enthusiastic, because we had a research basis for interest, because we had a track record at Duke of having collaborative surgeons with the research training. So it's pretty easy in that environment to generate support. At the same time, enrollment was difficult. This trial was very restrictive. the prostates needed to have a height of 25 millimeters, which correlated to a 20 cc volume, which correlated to possibly only 10% of all prostate cancers diagnosed in the United States. Nonetheless, we're able to accrue and to complete enrollment. These devices that were used were the traditional devices that were developed at EDAP, and a for-cause biopsy was obtained 24 months out, which you should realize was not the standard practice for radiation therapy, certainly not for surgery, and certainly not for cryotherapy. The effects from the trial were published, were presented publicly in the FDA panels and in subsequent meetings, and were demonstrably effective in reducing the volume of the glands to a low volume. In addition, the PSA nadirs were achieved in a large percentage of patients and without subsequent Phoenix criteria failures. I think it was important to say that it's important when you have an innovative technology to recognize that you're fighting upstream against tradition and against entrenched viewpoints. And one of the issues that came up with the prostate device applications was that the indications were for a disease, not for a device, not for a tool. And because of that, the usual and traditional approaches of comparators were 10-year follow-up survival data. And I would submit that was unfeasible, and I think that to the credit to the FDA, they recognized that and went a different path, which has been described carefully by the FDA at this meeting. We were able to present in public forum our efficacy data from this trial. And my point here is that it's the publication or the announcement and the public sharing, the data sharing of your experiences in a very organized way, which lends credibility. Because the actual North American experience is very, very small compared to the international experience. Yet in the North American medical centers, the credentialing committees throughout this country, the North American data will actually be looked upon as the more important data. And indeed, it's been stated publicly by some insurance executives that they need North American data to make their evidence-based judgments. So with this approval in October 2015, it became obvious that now prostate HIFU had joined the other indications for this focused therapy. And we also recognized that this is an ambulatory setting treatment, which was going to rub against tradition. So I collected a group together in November, and we began meeting to discuss collaborations. And I think that while we haven't begun our clinical applications, and other sites have, we've actually marshaled a fairly collaborative group, which will encompass the following features. First, I joined and I brought with me an additional surgeon, Dr. Polascik, who is well known in the world of focal therapy for prostate cancer, is the prime leader and organizer of the Focal Therapy Conference for prostate cancer that began 5 years ago and continues annually at either Amsterdam, Duke, or USC. And that 3-day meeting brings together the first day MR radiologists with focus on fusion biopsy and MR-guided biopsies of prostates for diagnosis and management. Also brings expertise in focal therapy with cryotherapy techniques. So we're now beginning to see the intersection of lines of investigation where active surveillance has led to a more conservative approach to prostate cancer, where MRI-guided biopsies have now led to imagining targeted areas for prostate treatment. We now begin to see the work from the University College of London with Mark Emberton and his group, and Dr. Ahmed, describing over 2,000 patients treated with focused ultrasound and a large percent with focal MR-guided fusion techniques. Not only did we bring an expert in cryotherapy, focal therapy, we brought to us algorithms for additional leadership with medical oncologists and the radiation oncologists. And this is built on our already existing multidisciplinary clinic, where we bring, similar to in the Stanford model, in a single session, a medical oncologist, a radiation oncologist, and a urologic oncologist to counsel patients newly diagnosed with prostate cancer. Shortly after those meetings, Dr. Kuntz came to me from radiation oncology and suggested, you know, I really think what we should do is do a focal HIFU and a whole gland intermediate dose radiation therapy. Don't you think that would be great? So already we were beginning to see some collaborative interest. At the same time, we worked with biomedical engineering and reached out to researchers in immunotherapy. Grant Inman is our basic clinical oncologist interested in immunotherapies of cancers, particularly bladder cancer. Dr. Zong, as you know, had previous preclinical work. We also reached out to the group of immunotherapists headed by Kim Larley, our former Cancer Center director, and began postdoctoral support with basic preclinical modeling in immunologic markers post-HIFU and a xenograft model. Reached out to radiology and talked to Raj Gupta, who is building his career on MR of the prostate, and indeed the radiology department did over 1,000 MRs of the prostate last year. We have become a multi-user site for fusion biopsy of the prostate using the latest technology, including in vivo Uranav technology, developed at the NIH by Peter Pinto. So where are we now? We're here, I think, at the point where we're going to be able to tell patients to come to our institution. Not only are they part of a newly approved technology which has a very good track record, but also is at the center point of an intersection of research and future directions for focused ultrasound. And I think the future is very bright. This is, I think, the way you build a good team. We will know in the future if it is successful, but I think we feel very good about our starts. And just to say a few things, I think that using MR-guided biopsies and fusions is a natural preliminary step to a targeted focused ultrasound approach. And indeed, the devices we see here, Focal One or the Uranav inclusion into the Sonicare device, will be the future of focal therapy for prostate cancer. If you've seen at this meeting, the morbidity profiles for these patients are amazingly good. 98% of patients have total continence, 87% of patients have preserved erection in some published data. So we know that this is going to require careful quality control and training, and I think we're looking to participate in a training model at our institution. We'd like to collaborate with other sites, and I think I've envisioned in the future for the clinical needs of focused ultrasound a HIFU approach, even a user group, finally possibly a clinical society for HIFU in urologic oncology. Thank you very much.